Welcome to The Ladder, a weekly dose of personal development ideas to help spark your imagination, increase your leadership skills, and bring more success into your life. And now, here's your host, James Theros.
Welcome to another episode of The Ladder. I'm your host, James Theros, and boy, I've got a very interesting topic for you today. I'm going to possibly step on some toes here, and I guess to some degree that is my intention, because this is part of what we have to do to ascend the ladder. The idea behind this podcast is to illuminate maybe some of the things that we could do better, or some of the things that we could maybe stop doing altogether, and just possibly develop a new paradigm or a thought process as it relates to our success on a daily basis. So today, the title of the podcast is "No One Owes You Anything." Let me repeat that. No one owes you anything. Nobody owes me anything. I was out riding my bicycle this morning, and I typically will stop about halfway, and then I will do a little bit of a live broadcast for some of my martial arts students. And this morning, as I was making my way on my bicycle up to the halfway point, I noticed an interesting phenomena that was happening, and I'll kind of explain how I got into that, and then I'm going to jump into some bullet points here that will help to tie this whole thing together. So this is a very, very broad topic here, and what was happening was I was on my bike headed on something called the Pinellas Trail here in Tarpon Springs, Florida, and I got onto the trail, and right about the beginning part of the actual trail, once I turned the corner off of the main street, I noticed that my main entryway to the trail was closed. They were doing some work on it, so I had to decide what I was going to do at that point. I had really two choices. I could turn around and go home, or I could take an alternate route and bypass this section of the trail that was closed and continue on my route for the day. And I chose to do the latter. So, see what I did there? That was unintended. This is the Latter, as in the latter choice, or later choice. So I started to make my way back a block or so to cross something called US 19 North, which is it's a death trap for anybody walking on a bicycle, and for many motorists as well. People just lose their minds on this stretch of a highway, and they do not use turn signals. They don't let people in. They drive way too fast, and lots of zipping in and zipping out, and people are killed and hurt on this street virtually every day. Anyway, I was heading back across this street, and I noticed that I was on a bicycle, and so I had a right-of-way on the little white lines that go across the street that are supposed to indicate to motorists, watch out, somebody might be walking or riding their bicycle across this, and you are to yield to those people. So the pedestrians and the people riding their bicycles, especially when the little white walk sign comes on, they are supposed to have the right-of-way. However, many drivers, and in fact most drivers, don't care about the fact that is the law, and they will blow right through that. And it's happened recently where I think it was an 85-year-old man got killed doing that very thing. He was in the right-of-way, and he was walking across the street on, I believe it was 19 in Alderman, which is one of the worst spots on 19 in this area. And a motorist did not use his signal, took a quick turn, and smashed right into him and killed him. So the message there is this old man was entitled to have the right of way, but guess what? The people in the car, they didn't care about who had the right of way, and they just zipped through it, and the old man lost his life. So that's really the kind of the gist of the podcast today, and I want to cover that from a lot of different angles here, because we are not entitled to really anything, and we get this. We've all heard it, and I'm guilty of it as well. Talking about the entitlement mentality of the millennial generation. But I have to ask you and ask everybody listening to this, and myself as included, where did that entitlement mentality come from? I think the entitlement mentality came from us, from their parents and their grandparents, because I still see it on a day-to-day basis, and it's got nothing to do with the millennials. We are the ones that taught them this behavior because we are the ones that are still engaging in this behavior on a day-to-day basis. I see the entitlement mentality from the youngest of the children to the oldest of the adults. And here in Florida, I've actually seen it even more so even than other places I've been to. So here's some examples that, I'll get into the examples for a second. Let me ask you a question, is this. As I was riding, I should probably back up a little bit. As I was continuing to ride my bicycle, I had several instances where I had the right of way, but the people driving their cars didn't seem to care that I had the right of way. And I'm going to tell you, if I had stuck to my guns and said, I'm the person on the bicycle, they have to yield to me, and I just strolled out across the street there, I probably would have ended up dead or seriously injured today. Because there were people not paying attention or that really didn't care because they were in a hurry and felt like, well, who are you? You're nobody. You're on a bicycle and I don't know you from Adam. So if I blow through this light, you better watch out for me. And that's exactly what I had to do. I had to watch out for them. So there were a couple of instances where I had the right of way and I should have just strolled out in front of them and went across the street, but I noticed that these people were not paying any attention, zero attention in my direction. And if I did that, if I took that chance, that more than likely what would have happened the moment I got in front of their car, that's when they would have looked forward and put their foot on the gas pedal and probably ran me over. So instead of going in front of their car, I did what I should have done, and what everybody should do is go behind that car and not take a chance. It's better safe than sorry. So here are some examples now of where I see the entitlement, and this is where I'm going to probably step on some toes because, it happens. And this is where I hope that you will take this in the right frame of mind and realize, wow, maybe there is something to this and maybe I am guilty of some of these things. And here they are, all right? People who are bigger feel entitled, and they feel entitled over people who are smaller. I know this because I'm a smaller person and I see it. I have to experience it day to day to day. If I'm driving in my car, and of course I'm driving a convertible, so somebody can see how big my head is, they can see how big my arms are, how big my hands are, approximately how tall I am. And if I make a turn where I'm driving slow, I will often get the finger, or I will get people that yell things into my car, go faster or move the heck out of the way, and that's putting it in a nice way. And I think to myself, well, if I was like twice my size and I was covered with tattoos and I had earrings and a shaved mohawk hairdo and my hands looked really old and crusty and things and looked like I lived a tough life, I don't think that they would do that because they don't know what I might do. And I might pull over, or I might follow them, and this is where we've got to get out of the entitlement mentality, because we just never know what somebody might do in any given circumstances, right? People go in and shoot in schools and shoot in businesses and kill people all the time for feeling slighted or disrespected all the time, and it happens in road rage so many times. So people that are bigger often feel entitled to be able to say things and do things and bully smaller people. So that's an example. And on the road, semis. And how many times have we heard that they think they own the road? And I'm sorry if you're a truck driver, but I'll tell you that seems to be the case. Is a truck driver will oftentimes be up on a highway, and they will decide, because they're the bigger vehicle, that they're going to literally pull out in front of you, stop you from making your progress. You might be doing 70 or 75 miles per hour, and they decide at that moment, they're looking behind, they see you coming up behind them, and they'll pull out into the fast lane, and then they'll drive 55 or 60 miles per hour for 5 or 10 minutes until they get around one vehicle, and then they'll decide to pull over and back into their lane, and not realizing that what they just did to the drivers behind them was exactly what they were experiencing from the other truck driver, and they pulled out and they caused problems for the other cars, and then they get upset when the cars, or they don't seem to care when the cars honk at them and things, and they should be upset, the cars, because that person just drove out there and felt entitled because I have a bigger vehicle. What are you going to do about it? That's basically the attitude that I believe that happens. You see it with semis. You see it with pickup trucks. I drive a little tiny convertible car, so I can't tell you how many times that people in pickup trucks or very large SUVs will drive on my bumper trying to get me to move faster, even though I'm already maybe exceeding the speed limit by 5 or 10 miles per hour, and it's not as fast as they'd like to go. So they'll get behind me and they will drive on my bumper. But you don't often see a little car doing that to a pickup truck or a van or anything like that. So that's another example. Here's another one. I hate to bring this up, but these are all examples of entitlement. There's an old adage that boys should never hit girls. I know this, and I'm 100% behind this. But what if a wife, for instance, or a girlfriend or a female points her finger in her husband's face, pokes him in the chest, dares him to hit her, and then pushes him over a couch and makes him fall down, and he gets angry? I mean, at that point, the lady in that case is taking way too much advantage of the mentality that men are not supposed to hit women or boys shouldn't hit girls, which is true, but that doesn't give that person the right to take advantage of that mindset and think that nothing could ever happen to them in those kind of cases. Another example might be a female maybe verbally abuses her husband or boyfriend and slaps him in the face in front of guests, and then maybe she gets surprised when he gets upset, embarrassed, and gets angry and pops her one. And again, I'm not condoning that behavior, but it happens. These kind of things happen. They're called domestic dispute cases, and a lot of times the women don't want to take responsibility for the fact that they pushed their man into that behavior. And they don't want to admit that, they just want to say, well, boys should never, ever, ever hit girls. I agree with that. But you know what? There's a time and place where they've got to realize, back in the Wild West when people carried guns and things like that, you didn't see that kind of behavior from people because they could get shot over it. And, nowadays it's no different. It can still happen today. So this is what I mean about entitlement. Somebody with that kind of mentality is using an entitlement mentality and really should watch themselves because they don't know what could happen from that other person who's bigger and stronger than them, right? When I was in West Palm Beach back in January or February of last year, I saw an older gentleman. My wife and I were at a Panera's, and we were out there having lunch, and 10 feet from us, this older man, he must have been 80, 85 years old, he started laying on his horn just louder and longer than anybody has a right to do so. All right, he felt like he was entitled to get through this parking lot, and there was a guy in front of him about 35 or 36 years old, twice his size, half his age or 1/3 his age, much bigger than him. And this older man just laid on his horn. He stuck his head out the window, gave the guy the finger, shook his fist at him, and yelled at him to move. And I was thinking the whole time, wow, this older man doesn't understand that he's taking advantage of this I'm entitled because I'm older and I'm your elder and you're supposed to respect me mentality, without realizing who this person in front of him was. If this person was somebody that didn't have manners and didn't abide by that rule, he could have slammed his brakes on, thereby blocking this older man in. He couldn't get anywhere, and he could have moved a lot faster than this older man. He could have gotten out of his car, ripped this man from his car, and taught him a lesson, and there's nothing the older man could have done about it. There would have been no time for him to do anything. And I thought, wow, this guy's taking a huge chance by doing this to this kid half his age. And even if he was right, and even if he was entitled, he shouldn't have taken it to that level. And wow, he really took a chance with this guy. And I thought, wow, I wanted to say something to him, but of course, out of respect, I didn't say anything to this older man. I've seen it happen with older ladies in supermarkets. They will be disrespectful to younger men, and you can see their attitude in their eyes as they're looking at these guys and thinking, I'm your elder and I'm a lady, so you can't hit me, and you're supposed to be respectful to me, and it's when they demand it or expect it, they're kind of being bullies. And let me ask you something. If in those kind of situations with the ladies or the old guy, do you think that they would behave the same way if they got onto a subway with a group of thugs? I would say no, but why not? Well, that's because the thugs don't care about the laws or what we are entitled to. And so the people in those situations, they understand that, and they really are they behave very, very differently in a situation like that. And that's because those thugs are kind of like back in the old West. They're the ones, the bandits with the guns. And if they don't like how they've been treated, they'll pull out a gun and blast somebody. But that hasn't changed in today's society. And then when people take advantage of this entitlement mentality, thinking that they're entitled to being treated a certain way, that's when they're demanding it. They're taking a huge risk. And again, it's like the pedestrians versus the bicycles. Who's going to win that fight every time? It's going to be 100% of the time, it's going to be the car. The car is going to win no matter what our right of way is. So, we see it all the time with people who is supposed to turn first at a red light, and if one person makes the turn out of turn, the other person gets upset and they gun their gas and run up on them and tailgate them and honk their horns and flip them the bird and things like that, not knowing who that other person in the other car is. That other person might be carrying a firearm. They might be in a stolen vehicle with a stolen firearm, and they might just open fire on that person for doing what they did to them, regardless if they were entitled to or not. So this is where we have to be careful. It's the same way in any area of our lives, right? And as far as red lights go, people blow through red lights all day long, even though it's illegal. So the law is there, and yes, we are entitled to go when the light turns green, but what if that maniac on the other side of the street doesn't care about that and blows through the light because they want to make it through there, and then they end up hitting us? Does it matter at that point that we had the right of way, that we were entitled to go? Not at all. We might even be in the hospital, be hospitalized or killed as a result of thinking that we're entitled to those things. So we've got to be careful about the whole entitlement mentality. Rather than feeling like we're entitled to something, it's still much safer to still pay attention, because again, like I said, not everybody's going to follow or abide by the law. Listen, the whole message here is that nobody owes us anything. For example, somebody that says, "You owe me an apology." Does that attitude really ever get us anywhere? I think that's a bully mindset. Somebody walks into a store or walks into a relationship and says, "You owe me an apology." So even if the other person does apologize, chances are they don't even really mean it. It may be somebody walks in and says, your employee owes me an apology. I demand an apology. Well, that employee, probably the only reason they're going to give the apology is because they're trying to save their jobs, and it's not because they really feel like they owe that person an apology. And maybe in some cases they do, but maybe in some cases the customer is really the one that owes the apology because of something they did or said that kind of brought that on. Now, the customer is always right in the end. We know this, but sometimes the customer is not always right, and they have to maybe recognize when they're in the wrong. And this is where we all have to come together and realize that there's no entitlement. It's the same thing with a person who chooses to have, a large family of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 kids, and then expects everybody else to pay their bills. They're entitled to, get welfare or EBT cards or whatever these things are called because they chose to have these massive families that they can't afford to pay for, and they think they're entitled for the rest of us to pay for it. Nothing could be further from the truth. When you make a choice like that, you are also choosing the repercussions that go along with it. If you choose to walk across a busy intersection and like on US 19 north or south, going across a street in that particular area, knowing that this is an area where people don't pay attention as much and they're going to drive faster and more erratically, then you're taking a huge risk, and nobody really cares about the fact that you had the right of way or what you're entitled to. And this is the same way in business. It's the same way in life. If we want to earn something, if we want something in life, we have to earn it. We can't demand it. We can't feel like we're entitled to anything. And so I'm bringing up all of these points because if you look around, you're going to see it, and maybe you find yourself identifying with some of these behaviors and thinking, wow, I've done that before. I'll tell you, I've done it before. I'm not too proud to admit that. But this is where we have to take stock of our behavior and our thought processes and develop a new paradigm. Nobody's entitled to anything. Society creates rules, and we all agree to these rules, And that's one of those rules is we're supposed to be respectful to our elders. I wholeheartedly believe with that, and I teach that on a daily basis to my students. I also abide by that on a daily basis. However, when an elder takes advantage of that mindset and uses that to become a bully to somebody younger than them, I think that's where they're stepping over their boundaries. And again, they're taking a huge risk, because that person that they're disrespecting that's younger than them, stronger than them, more able than them, might not have the same level of respect for them that I would or you would, and that could be the end of that person's life because they chose to put their entitlement out front and say, you owe me an apology, you owe me this respect, you owe me that chair, you owe me the ability to go first because I'm older than you. And again, they may get by with it for a while, but if they continue to do that, they're eventually going to run into somebody who doesn't follow the rules, doesn't believe the way that I or you believe, and again, that could end them in the hospital or end them up in the morgue. And so that's the message today: is we should never feel entitled to anything. We should still, we know what our rights are, and when they're applicable, of course, take advantage of them. But we should never expect that everybody's going to abide by those things, and we should always abide by the old adage that it's better safe than sorry. So if I'm bigger than somebody, I'm not going to take advantage of the fact that I'm bigger than them by trying to bully them, because that person might have skills that I'm unaware of, or they might have a weapon on them that they could pull out and end my life with it. So that's not the reason I'm going to do it, because I'm going to be respectful to them regardless. But I'm talking about it from a perspective of somebody who maybe doesn't study martial arts and doesn't, or is not in the military and doesn't get taught about respecting other people and respecting human life and respecting other people's property. We all know people who could care less about us or what we feel like we're entitled to, and that's the message, guys. I don't really have anything more to say about it. I'm just throwing a lot of thoughts out there, but I see it as a huge problem in our society, and I want to just at least talk about it for a moment, bring it to the forefront, and get you to at least consider it the next time that you're driving and you think that because you're in the turning lane, you don't really have to use your turn signal because it's obvious as to what your intentions are. I say it's not as obvious as you think it is, because when we put our turn signals on, we're actually indicating to everybody around us, not just the person behind us, but also the person in front of us, the person who's making a turn from the opposite side of the street adjacent to us. They're making their decisions when we use our turn signals or when we don't. And if we don't use our turn signals, then we're leaving them to assume that they know what our intentions are, and again, that can cause problems. So it's a lack of communication, and it all goes back to that whole entitlement mentality. So there you have it, guys. Hope you enjoyed some of this today. If you did, let me know. If you didn't, let me know that as well, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on what we talked about today. So until next time, this is James Theris saying, use your turn signals. Have a great week.